Hello and welcome to my vlog. Today we're going to discuss how we don't physically journey to heaven, we transform ourselves, and how that transformation doesn't just pertain to us, but to the Earth and other planets in general as they go through and rise in phases of ascendancy from one type of planet to another. A colony on the third level of heaven had grown in wisdom and spirituality. The leaders and citizens were to be ushered into a superior sphere where their learning would take on new heights, but they didn't travel to a new location. The entire colony and surrounding area was altered, transformed from one dimension to another. The process whereby this was done will be similar to when the Earth rises from a planet of atonement to a superior level, a planet of regeneration. The fact that we live in a densely packed, multidimensional multi-universe means that we simply plug into a different set of vibrations, harmonies, data, densities, ratio of matter to energy, all and more, to move from one plane to another. Exactly how this occurs, what are the actual mechanics, is a mystery. But the ability to exist in one dimension or another, just by dialing back or forward certain physical and mental variables, explains why people see phantoms, near-death experiences, that spirits exist all around us, and the resurrection of Christ. The High Spirit Arnell told the Reverend G. Val Owen how an entire colony moved up one sphere while remaining in place. The colony was started by the survivors of a religious massacre. The High Spirit Shonar brought them together to wake from the dead and asked Wolfreyer and others to try to convince them to forego their desire for revenge and seek spiritual substance instead. Some of the original group, mostly the wives and children, were able to immediately grasp the need to release their primitive urges to avenge their death. These were already in Sphere 4, awaiting their brethren to join them. Those who remained, fighting their baser instincts, made great strides under the governance of their bishop and leaders. They had been given help from high spirits and watched over for any sign of assistance they may have needed. Eventually, they were judged fit to ascend. First, the citizens were gathered in a great hall, which served as a spiritual and civil center for the community. Next, the leaders of the city invited the high spirits, Wolfreyer and Arnell, to walk down the main aisle and address the multitude. Meanwhile, outside, the transformation was completed by high spirits. The crowd was about to receive a great surprise. Arnell tells us what happened. Wolfreyer spoke to them. She said, "I am happy today, good people, because what my Lord Shonar began, by high grace we have so far completed. You have striven well and have won through. You have by slow degrees so progressed as to merit advancement into the sphere next in order. Since you came here within this house, unknown to you this transmutation has been brought upon you, and now you are within Sphere 4. Be quiet in your minds for the time, good people, and at the proper moment you shall join with your loved ones and your friends and your children whom you so long have striven to find." Then she and I and our company formed in circle, facing outward. But the circle was not finished. There was a gap in the platform. Seeing what was toward, the dear youth Habdi came and joined us, and, taking my hand in his own, expressed his love to me and his thanks on behalf of the people who had become in a way his own. As we stood there, silent and intent upon our business, the walls became less dense of substance until at last they were translucent and then invisible altogether. The open country was before the multitude, and they saw a beautiful meadowland and trees and flowers and fountains of water which had not been there when they had entered that house. But they were sore perplexed, so I addressed them and told them that the country around the guild house was all changed now, and that they should go forth questing, for they were in the country where dwelt their own people, whom they sought, and others also who had become friends to those, and would so become to the present assembly. Imagine entering a great hall, sitting down, then a bright angel tells you to stand up and peer outside, but all you see are walls. Slowly the opaque barriers become translucent, and you see the countryside around you. You think this must be an illusion, because the surroundings are not what they were when you walked into the great center. Then you are told that all of you had been transformed, including the city you lived in, that now you exist on a higher, a more glorious level. This, too, shall be the process the earth will travel through in the distant future, when mankind is at harmony with nature and themselves. There won't be a cataclysm, only a transmutation. I am not sure if it will happen gradually, like parents watching their child grow over time, where their past childhood is remembered fondly, but the new reality is what the parents are focused on. Or will a human race collectively go to sleep and wake up on a new earth? Whatever the method, it will occur, for that is our destiny. Arnell describes the subsequent actions of the newfound residents on the fourth level of heaven. When the walls were once more materialized, the multitude streamed forth without. Here they paused to see what changed aspect was upon the place. To their eyes, accustomed to the somewhat subdued light of the sphere 3, this was indeed a paradise of brightness. The trees and flowers and grass were of a much brighter hue, and the light more mellow. Nor was there any desert land to be seen, for the forest filled the horizon on every hand with a rich curtain of colors. But nowhere was the party to be found for which they sought. So they went forth and entered the forest paths on every hand. They did not pause to consider which was the direction in which they should go. They did not see the company of those who had come from the higher spheres to guide them, but one and another they found their friends and were well content. Thus a widespread colony grew up there. Will this be our fate in some future life? Those of us who have worked to balance spirituality and materialism, striving to replace our primitive emotions with uplifting feelings of love, charity, and fraternity, will we go out the door and see a brighter earth, with flora shining in colors we haven't perceived before? I believe the day will come. It may not arrive as fast as we desire, but seldom anything does. But that day will dawn, and then we will be able to look back and know that all of our trials were worth it. The process of transmutation. Arnell didn't just detail the new landscape for Jiva Owen, he also explained the process as well as he could to a Church of England reverend residing in the early 1900s. The change which had come upon these people had not been of so sudden a nature as might appear from my narration. It had been long in preparing. They, by their endeavors and by our teachings, had been advancing towards the estate of Sphere 4 for a long time. The guild house had served as a focus wherein their aspirations had been gathered. Thereon we had directed, in chief, the streams of our powers. Mingling there and blending, this content of higher conditioned, had laved and bathed them had they gone about their work of building. Unknown to them, except to a few as that priest and the 2 laymen, and some small number else, they had advanced in spiritual uplifting until they were really beyond the sphere 3 in personality, but still resident in it as to their environment apparent to them. The initiation we had brought about within the guild house was merely the sealing of what had already come upon them, no more than that. The key phrase to consider in what Arnell told Jiva Owen is beyond sphere 3 in personality. The word personality is used quite often, not only in communications by various spirits to Jiva Owen, but also to other spiritist mediums. I believe it is the closest definition of what we really are. We aren't human, that is just a temporary condition. We are spirits, but in identifying an individual spirit, It doesn't denote a uniqueness amongst spirits. Hence, instead of using the term individual, which means one person or one spirit, Arnell and others use the term personality to define a collection of experiences, attributes, characteristics, and level of spirituality. After all, one can't point out an odd-shaped spirit, or a left-handed spirit, or an extremely intelligent spirit, since all spirits are created equally, literally, all have the same capacity. While one spirit may be superior in wisdom from another, it is just a matter of time before the lesser spirit catches up or surpasses the other in wisdom, and all can transform their physical appearance to suit their desires. Hence, if they so wished, all spirits could look, act, and talk alike. The differentiation is solely in what a spirit has accumulated in their long ascent up the spiritual ladder. Our preoccupation with race, tribe, and homogeneous cultures is quite unimportant. Our differences are but part of the lesson plan. They are one more experience and a learning opportunity. Think about what that means to a spirit peering down at us. It is as if the teachers were watching with amusement the trading of marbles and the discussion of what color and type of marbles were the best amongst the children. It served the purpose of initiating discussion and debate, but on the whole was trivial in the years of schooling ahead. The collection of personalities in that colony in Sphere 3 had the correct vibrations and spiritual maturity to reside in, fit in, and be in affinity with the other personalities of Sphere 4. Hence, they were promoted. Thusly, as a collective, the environment of their old city would be transformed to be in tune with Sphere 4. Arnell tells us more. We did not transfer them from one locality to another. Now, this I find difficult to make clear for you to whom distance is so real a thing. It is not to us as it is to you. You might, as I say to you by way of example, you might be speaking of you and me at this moment as being distant each from other. For you cannot see me, and you hear me only interiorly, as the voice of someone far away, but that is not so. It is merely that your state and my own are dissimilar. Our environment is diverse by reason of our condition being on two different planes of activity, and yet we are not dissimilar in total, for, see you write what I impress you to write, and that could not be except some likeness of nature should be to you and to me both. So it was with those people of the guild house. It was not their residence which was changed locally, but their environment was transmuted about them, and they became, by that transaction, correspondent no longer to the conditions of Sphere 3, but to those of the Sphere 4. It is as if you were a player on a team, one of the best players. Your team wore a jersey of red and white. During the very time you were engaged in contest against another team, who wore blue and yellow jerseys, you were notified of a trade to the other team. The other team was generally known to be of higher caliber. You stayed on the field, took off your red and white shirt, and donned the blue and yellow. Your personality stayed the same, but you changed teams to a superior team where you would be a better fit. The Earth, too, is being prepared. The colony on Sphere 3 was transformed. They became associated with another sphere, to the sphere where they had, through long study and work, been promoted to. The gradual progression resulting in a change of state is also happening at this very moment on Earth. In the book Genesis by Allan Kardec, a spirit, Dr. Berry, notifies us of Earth's planned transformation. Yes, indeed, humankind is being transformed, just as it has been transformed in other epochs. And each transformation is marked by a turning point, which, for the human species, is what the turning point in growth is for the individual. These crises, frequently painful and dolorous, carry generations and institutions along with them. but are always followed by a phase of material and moral progress. After nearly a century, Earth's humanity has arrived at one of these growth periods and is in the middle of a transformative endeavor. This is why humankind is being shaken on all sides, caught up in a kind of fever as if driven by an invisible power until it is settled on new foundations. Whoever sees it afterwards will find many changes in its customs, its character, its laws, and its beliefs. In other words, in its entire societal aspect. Just as in the colony where the teachers from higher spheres guided the progression of the inhabitants, our spirit mentors too are guiding the entire human race. Whereas we may not see them, we can't resist their influence. The spirit Arago, again in Genesis, notifies us of the connection and the inevitability of the coming transmutation. The spirit, due to its contact and interconnections with the physical elements, is also subject to influences that modify its dispositions, although they do not deprive it of free will and overexcite or attenuate its activity, thereby contributing to its development. The turmoil that sometimes manifests within an entire population among the people of the same race is not a fortuitous event, nor is it the result of a capricious act. Its cause lies in the laws of nature. Unconscious at first, this turmoil, which is nothing more than a vague desire, an indefinable yearning for something better, a need for change, is expressed through silent agitation, and then through actions that prepare social revolutions, which, believe it or not, also have their own lifespan, similar to physical revolutions, because everything is connected. If your spirit sight were not limited by the veil of matter, you would see these fluidic currents, which like thousands of conductor wires, link up the things of the spirit world and the physical world. When you hear that humankind has arrived at a period of transformation and that the earth must ascend within the world hierarchy, do not see anything mystical in these words, but, to the contrary, the fulfillment of one of the great unavoidable laws of the universe, against which all human ill will shall break. We, collective humanity of Earth, are being taught, and as we gain knowledge through experiences mandated by the spirit realm, our personality is being modified. Our harmony, vibrations, and spiritual feelings are affected. Once a majority of us are in tune with an advanced state of being, the Earth will be transformed in place to stand side by side with other advanced planets. Transmutation explains resurrection. Arnell gave one more example of the density of the spirit universe in which we live, where all things coexist within the same space, but not the same dimension. When Jesus came into the house wherein his friends were gathered on that first Easter, he came unseen. Then he gathered from them what substance he had need of, and, by what process you now call materialization, he fashioned him a body of flesh. Then he was visible to them. Also, his environment had become changed. When he had transacted such business as was his at that time, he dematerialized again that body of flesh, and, in that act, he changed his environment once again back to that of spirit. But all through the process, from first to last, presence and absence had no part whatsoever. Both before and after his appearing in bodily form to them, he was there unseen. You get me, my son? The change was of condition, not of locality. I believe Jesus visualized the room in which his disciples were gathered. At that thought, he appeared in the room, seeing the men talking. Next, he altered his state to one denser, more matter, so his friends could detect his presence, again by the power of his will. After he finished, he returned to his normal state, and by the action of another thought, came back to the plane in which he had left. We have only just begun to grasp this concept of the fluidity of existence. The advent of CGI, computer-generated imagery, whereby the entire environment is driven by software created by the thoughts of the creative directors of the movie, is totally flexible. Anything that can be imagined or visualized can be created, albeit in only 2 dimensions in our physical world. Whereas in the spirit realm, reality is created in multiple dimensions, all driven by the power of the will. This is exactly why you, my dear reader and fellow traveler on earth, must survive the bad periods of life, for they are training missions, teaching us how to harness our minds in the worst of circumstances. If you would like to learn more about the spirits and spirit universe, what I have just presented to you was in Chapter 42 of my book, Spirits and the Spirit Universe, Book 2. It will tell you what is awaiting you when you cross over to heaven, when you leave this physical plane and return where you always have been and where you are an immortal spirit, to the spirit plane. Learn and discover what is awaiting you and understand why you must go through what you have gone through here on earth. God bless.